What would you do if the person who vowed to wait for you betrayed your trust while you were risking your life overseas? For me, Sergeant Emily Carter, forgiveness was never an option. If you enjoy stories of calculated revenge, hit that subscribe button and join our community of revenge enthusiasts. I stood at the airport in my crisp military uniform, my heart pounding with anticipation. After 8 grueling months in a combat zone, dodging bullets and losing friends, I was finally home. My duffel bag felt light on my shoulder, but the invisible weight of war still pressed down on me as I scanned the crowd for the familiar face of my husband Jake. But Jake wasn't there. Every returning soldier around me fell into the waiting arms of loved ones. Tears, laughter, and the beautiful chaos of reunion surrounded me, making my solitude all the more striking. A young boy pointed at my medals, his eyes wide with admiration. I smiled at him, the tight knot of disappointment growing in my chest. I called Jake twice, then 3 times. With each unanswered ring, memories flashed through my mind. Nights in the desert when his voice on the phone had been my only comfort, the promises we'd made, the countdown calendar we'd kept together through video calls. Finally, he answered, his voice groggy despite it being 2 p.m. Oh shit, was that today? I'm so sorry, babe. Got caught up with work and completely lost track. I'll come get you right now. I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. I'd rehearsed this moment for months, the way he would run to me, lift me off my feet, the feel of his arms around me after so long apart. Now, I stood alone, a warrior without my welcome home. Don't worry, I said, my voice military steady despite the tremor I felt inside. I'll grab a cab. As I hung up, an elderly veteran in a Vietnam cap caught my eye from across the terminal. He offered a solemn salute, a silent acknowledgement of both my service and the pain he somehow recognized in my eyes. I returned the salute, my hand shaking slightly. The man nodded, a moment of understanding passing between 2 soldiers from different wars. The house was spotless when I arrived, suspiciously so. Jake was never the cleaning type. The military had trained me to notice what others missed, to sense danger before it announced itself. It was a skill that had saved my life overseas. Now, that same vigilance sent warning signals flaring through my mind. I stood in the entryway, taking a moment to breathe in the scent of home I'd dreamed about for months. But something was off. Beneath the strong smell of cleaning products was another scent, one that didn't belong. As I walked through our home, my fingers trailing along the furniture we'd picked out together, little details caught my trained eye. A wine glass with faint lipstick that wasn't my shade hidden behind cleaning supplies under the sink, a drawer of his clothes that smelled of unfamiliar perfume, and receipts for expensive restaurants on nights he told me he was working late during our video calls. I sat on our bed, running my hand over the new sheets I'd never seen before. I pulled my military photo from the nightstand, the one Jake had promised to keep beside him every night. The frame was dusty, pushed back behind his charging phone, as if it had been moved to make room for something else. Something, or someone, more important. My hand trembled as I placed the photo back, memories washing over me. The day I deployed, Jake sobbing at the airport, promising to write every day, vowing that distance would only make us stronger. I remember the care packages I'd sent from overseas, each one filled with letters telling him how the thought of returning to him kept me going through the darkest days. That night, Jake made love to me mechanically, as if fulfilling an obligation. His kisses missed their mark, his touch lacked the passion I remembered. I tried to lose myself in the reunion, to feel the connection that had once burned so brightly between us, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept checking his phone, smiling at text messages he quickly hid from my view. Everything okay? I asked, my soldier's intuition screaming warnings, the same gut feeling that had told me when an ambush was imminent or when a road wasn't safe to travel. Just work stuff, he replied too quickly, not meeting my eyes. They can't function without me for a minute. In the darkness, as Jake slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling. Across the world, I had faced death with less fear than I felt now, confronting the possibility that the life I'd been fighting to return to might have been a mirage. For 3 days, Emily observed. Jake took calls in the bathroom with the shower running. He claimed to have dinner with the guys from work, but dressed in his expensive clothes and cologne. When she offered to join, there was always an excuse. On the 4th night, I followed him. The decision came after a day of pretending his excuses made sense, pretending I didn't notice how he angled his body away from mine, pretending my heart wasn't breaking with each passing hour. I borrowed my friend's car, Sarah, who had served with me and understood without needing explanations. "Do what you need to do," Sarah had said, pressing the keys into my palm and squeezing my hand. "And remember, whatever you find, you're not alone." The evening air was cool as I trailed Jake at a distance, utilizing the surveillance techniques that had kept me alive in war zones. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside, a storm was brewing. With each turn Jake made, memories surfaced: our first date, our wedding day, the tearful goodbye at my deployment. 8 months of longing, of counting days, of falling asleep to his voice on recorded messages when connection was impossible. Jake drove to a trendy downtown apartment building, the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman, using a keycard to enter with the familiarity of routine. I parked across the street, my military training allowing me to become invisible, just another shadow in the gathering dusk. Through the glass doors, I watched as a stunning woman with cascading blonde hair embraced him. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness. Their lips met with the comfort of established lovers, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture I recognized as intimately his. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not just my heart, but something deeper, the foundation of trust I'd built my life upon. I thought of the nights in the desert when the sound of artillery had kept me awake, how thoughts of Jake had been my sanctuary. How naive I had been. A single tear escaped before my military discipline reasserted itself. I wiped it away roughly, the last tear I would allow myself for him. I didn't confront him that night, or the next, or the week after. The soldier in me took control, analyzed the situation, gather intelligence, plan the mission, execute with precision. I placed a discreet tracker on his car and monitored his movements, marking each location on a map in our home office, cataloging the pattern of betrayal in the same methodical way I'd once mapped enemy positions. I photographed their encounters from safe distances, each click of the camera shutter like a physical blow. 3 times a week, they met. Tuesday evenings, when he told me he had a company networking event. Friday afternoons, his supposed gym sessions. Sunday mornings, when he claimed to be golfing with clients. I recorded his lies about where he was going each night, saving voicemails and texts in a dedicated folder. Working late, don't wait up. The client meeting got moved to dinner. I'll grab something on the way home. Each lie another bullet in my arsenal. Most devastating of all, I gained access to our shared cloud account, finding intimate photos and videos they'd made together during my deployment. Photos the blonde woman had sent him while I was overseas, the timestamps showing they began just 3 weeks after I deployed. The same week I had lost Sergeant Martinez and Private Rodriguez to an IED. The same week I'd suffered a shrapnel wound to my thigh that still ached when it rained. The night I discovered the photos, I limped to the bathroom, my old wound throbbing in sync with my pulse. I rolled up my pajama leg to reveal the jagged scar, the price I had paid while he betrayed me. I traced its outline, thinking of Rodriguez's young daughter who would never see her father again, of Martinez's wife who had become a widow that same day. What would they think of my pain now, this betrayal that cut deeper than shrapnel? My reflection showed a woman I barely recognized, hollow-eyed, pale with shock and grief. But as I stared, something shifted in my gaze. The vulnerability hardened into resolve, grief transforming into cold, calculated purpose. All the while, I played the role of the adoring, unsuspecting wife. I cooked his favorite meals. I asked about his day with feigned interest. I even bought him a new watch for his birthday, watching him unwrap it with a smile that never reached my eyes, knowing exactly where the old one had been left, on the blonde woman's nightstand, captured clearly in one of my surveillance photos. Our 5th wedding anniversary was approaching, an anniversary Jake had apparently forgotten until I mentioned my plans for a small gathering with our closest friends and family. I brought it up over breakfast, watching his face carefully for a reaction. Panic flickered across his features before he masked it with a smile. Anniversary? Right, 5 years. Time flies. I took a slow sip of my coffee, remembering how we'd celebrated our 4th anniversary over a choppy video call. I'd saved my dessert from the mess hall for days to have something special to eat while we shared a meal across continents. I'd fallen asleep with my laptop open, his face the last thing I saw before dreams took me. I thought we could have everyone over, I said, my voice honeyed with false sweetness. Your parents, my sister, all our friends. A proper celebration since I missed last year's. That sounds great, babe, he said absent-mindedly, already typing on his phone. Whatever you want to do. I smiled, a predator's smile that Jake was too distracted to notice. Whatever I want. Perfect. Later that day, I sat alone in our home office, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. Photos, receipts, location data. My hand moved to the chain around my neck where my dog tags rested alongside my wedding ring, the ring I'd removed during deployment for safety but kept close to my heart. Now it felt like a shackle. You chose the battlefield, Jake, I whispered to the empty room. But I'm the soldier. The party was meticulously planned with the same attention to detail I applied to military operations. 50 of our closest friends and family members gathered in our backyard. Jake's colleagues who had covered for him during his business meetings, his parents who had welcomed me as a daughter, my fellow soldiers who understood the code of honor Jake had so casually discarded. The evening light cast a golden glow across the gathering as champagne flowed and conversations hummed. I moved through the crowd in a striking blue dress that matched my eyes, playing the perfect hostess while a storm brewed inside me. The garden was decorated with photos from our wedding and framed letters Jake had written during my first deployment, letters full of promises now broken. I had arranged for a projector and screen, ostensibly for a slideshow of our 5 years together. Private Matthews, who had served under my command and owed me his life, managed the technical setup with military efficiency. Our eyes met across the yard, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. He knew what was coming. He had been there the night I had pulled him from a burning Humvee, my own uniform on fire as I dragged him to safety. He understood loyalty in a way Jake never would. Jake arrived late, claiming a work emergency. I watched him work the crowd, charming and apologetic, the perfect husband making up for his tardiness with extra attention. Only I noticed how his hand kept returning to his pocket, checking his phone. The blonde from the apartment building had texted him repeatedly throughout the day, frustrated that he was unavailable. I knew this because I had been monitoring every message, watching their argument unfold in real time. "Where are you?" The latest text read. "You promised we'd have the whole weekend." I moved to Jake's side, sliding my arm through his with practiced affection. "Everyone's been asking for you," I said, my lips brushing his cheek in a kiss that felt like ash in my mouth. He squeezed my waist, the picture of devotion. "Sorry I'm late, Emmy. You know how work gets." "I do know," I said, holding his gaze until discomfort flickered in his eyes. "I know exactly how it gets." When everyone had drinks in hand, I clinked my glass for attention. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to me. My heartbeat was steady, my hands calm, the same composure I'd maintained under enemy fire. "I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate 5 wonderful years with Jake," I began, my voice steady. "Marriage, as we all know, is built on trust, honesty, and fidelity." Jake smiled nervously from across the yard, perhaps sensing something in my tone. "I've prepared a little presentation about our journey together," I continued, especially focusing on the past 8 months while I was deployed. The screen lit up, but instead of vacation photos, it displayed a timeline meticulously documenting Jake's affair. Dates, locations, text messages, photos of them together, all time-stamped and organized with military precision. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. "As you can see," I narrated calmly as Jake's face drained of color, "while I was serving our country, dodging bullets, and watching my friends die, my husband was serving himself quite well." Jake lunged toward the projector. "Emily, stop this right now. This is Private Matthews," I called out. A large man in civilian clothes who had been quietly serving drinks stepped forward. He had been in my unit, and I had saved his life during an ambush. "Sir, I suggest you remain where you are," Matthews said quietly to Jake. I continued my presentation methodically, revealing not just the affair but also how Jake had been siphoning money from our joint savings account to buy gifts for his mistress, using funds that included my combat pay. "I filed divorce papers this morning," I announced as the final slide appeared. "And because Jake was foolish enough to commingle his inheritance with our joint accounts and put my name on the deed to this house as a surprise before my deployment, I'm legally entitled to quite a lot of it." Jake's parents stared at their son in disgust. His father, a Vietnam veteran, removed his jacket and walked out without a word. "But don't worry about me being vindictive," I said with a cold smile. "I've already transferred half of our savings to a separate account for Jake. The other half will be donated to the Wounded Warrior Project in his name. They'll be sending him thank you letters for years." As guests began to leave, murmuring in shock and offering me supportive hugs, Jake finally found his voice. "You've ruined me," he hissed. "Was this worth it? Humiliating me in front of everyone we know." I leaned in close. "That wasn't the humiliation, Jake. That comes next." The following day, as Jake arrived at his office, he found his company email had been copied on a message to his entire firm, including his bosses, with evidence that he had been falsifying. Was justice served in this story? Tell us what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of calculated revenge.